It's my duty, my very pleasant duty, to propose a toast to the bridesmaids. But before I do that, I'd like to preface my remarks for about 35 minutes with some other observations. First of all, about the organisation today. Some of you probably know from Neil's past and his record that as far as organisation and setting things up is concerned, he's always been a guy that did it in the freewheeling, hands-off, let things take their course, stand back, roll with the punches, play what's in front of you, all that stuff. But as a major departure from form, Neil has decided, as you might have noticed, today to take a more hands-on approach, a more dirigiste approach, as the French would say. And in this, we have to say that he has succeeded handsomely. He's planned every detail, and it's all, by and large, come off. One of his most ambitious parts of this plan, this master plan, was to very carefully calibrate the alcohol requirements of this motley group. And in so doing, he ambitiously set out a questionnaire to probe your alcohol drinking habits. And you may recall that you were asked to state your preferences as between red wine, white wine, champagne, and beer. A very creditable attempt to, as I say, calibrate the needs of the evening. You may be interested to learn that the Reverend Scott McCarthy ticked all 4 boxes. I think before I really get underway, I'd also like to pay tribute to some of the celebrities that we have present with us tonight. We have, in a sense, 2 of the most prominent nearly men of Scottish sport. In that corner there, we've got Billy Rafferty. I say a nearly man, not because he's nearly a man, obviously, but he's almost certainly one of the best footballers never to play for Scotland. And any other time, Billy would have had a cap. And his life's been greatly enhanced by his beautiful and talented wife, Elaine, who has many endearing qualities, including her own particular brand of thought process, which led her on one prominent occasion to declare, as she stepped out onto the ski slopes at the beginning of her holiday, having rented her equipment, I'm not going out there, it's far too slippy. The other nearly man is right over here. Irving Davidson is certainly one of the finest rugby players that Langham produced that didn't get a cap. Cruelly robbed of the opportunity to play for his country. However, he survived the sadness that that's brought him by adopting other hobbies. And Irving is never to be seen without a camera around his neck now. He is Langham's answer to David Bailey, unquestionably. And on occasions such as these, he is a member of what you might call the Langham paparazzi. Paparazzi is the plural of the Italian word paparazzo, which translates as a fat man with a camera. You'll notice I'm now moving away from Irving. I'm moving towards a treasure trove of golfers at this table. Well, not Johan, obviously, but there are some wonderful array of golfers. We have DJ Russell here, who has graced the fairways in the European Tour and in the Seniors Tour, and by a controversial omission from the Ryder Cup team this year, he has to be with us tonight. From what I'm hearing, he possibly should have been playing in the Ryder Cup. And we also have Ian Young, the swing guru, the swing doctor, who certainly cured my wife's rather errant swing temporarily. And also at this table, we have David Latimer. David Latimer, the the impresario of soft furnishings, the doyen of fancy goods. David is himself a very competent golfer, but also more recently has taken up other hobbies. And he has now taken up cycling, but he's become something of a local hero. If you're lucky, or possibly unlucky, you might see him burling up Callister, his little legs going round, rather disturbingly clad in lycra. And he is unquestionably Langham's answer to Lance. What's his second name? What is Lance's second name? Armstrong. Lance Armstrong, though obviously, except for the drugs. Though David has been known to give the Benlin a bit of stick occasionally. David's other great talent on the golf course is his invention of swear words, of profanities. If David misses a relatively short putt, he'll snarl viciously, "Crakes." And this is his idea of a really bad swear word. And it's said with such venom that it actually appears to be a swear word. But he's not the only person in this room to have coined his own swear words. My brother David, when he was very young, had his own vicious swear words. When he confronted a crisis or some problem, some setback, he would exclaim, "Pops and Luggets, bad boys and bad witches." And he stuck with this through the years until eventually, as he entered the world of business, and at the age of 27, it didn't seem to cut it anymore, and he stopped saying it then. You might be interested to hear how David started in business. His initial retail experiment, for that's the word, was to set up a shop in our house, a family home in Eskvale at the end of the bridge. The family lived in Eskvale until my parents moved to Great Oaks in 1968. Now, Great Oaks is currently on the market. It's got a wonderful location. It's very competitively priced. And we make a wonderful home for almost anybody. Anyways, in Eskvale, David had a bedroom at the front, and David decided to set up a sweetie shop in the front bedroom. And his strategy, his business plan, was to go across the road to Mrs. Hetherington's, where that fancy chocolate shop now is, and buy some sweets there, transport them across to his bedroom, and then sell them to Neil and I at a profit. Now, there's two serious flaws in this business plan. The first is fairly obvious, and that is that when Neil and I wanted to buy sweets, we would simply go to Mrs. Hetherington's and not bother giving David the extra. But there was a more fundamental flaw, and that was that we were all at Langham Academy, and David got out of school at 4 o'clock. Neil and I got out at 10 to 4. This meant that we were back at the house before David. David would then go into his bedroom, discover that in fact his sweets had been depleted, not to say completely stolen, and his plan was in ruins. Pops and Luggets, bad boys and bad witches rang out in his anguish. I forgot, well, I didn't forget, I kept the best till last. On this golfing table here, we also have Daryl Rees. Now, Daryl Rees, I have it on good authority, is from Wales. Land of sparkling rugby, Charlotte Church, boisterous male voice choirs, somewhat apprehensive farm animals. We had a very enjoyable holiday. We had a very enjoyable holiday in Wales when I was 11. All 5 of us, David, Neil, and I, my mother and father, stayed in a caravan in a farmer's field in order to watch, to spectate at the Empire and Commonwealth Games that were then taking place in Cardiff. And the highlight of the week was going to be the final of the mile. Herb Elliott at that time was the world mile record holder. The headline act, very much so. And my father in particular was desperately keen to see Herb Elliott run this and possibly break the world record again. As the week progressed, I was gradually but irreversibly afflicted with monumental constipation. And my loving mother went and obtained a delayed action laxative prescription. This was delayed action, but also when it kicked in, as they say, it kicked in with a thermonuclear intensity. So needless to say, as we reached the end of the week and the mile runners were coming onto the track, Herb Elliott to the fore, crowd holding its collective breath, the thermonuclear laxative kicked in. My father led me, so I had a terrible propensity for getting lost. My father led me by the hand out of the stand, away from the mile final, towards the toilet. I can't remember for certain what my father said as we left the stand, but I'm fairly sure it wasn't Pops and Nuggets, bad boys and bad witches. Enough of that. I feel I need to say something to the bride and groom, who I believe have just got married. They are, we can all see it, they are a beautifully suited pair. They're going to have years of much happiness together, that's obvious. Apart from all the obvious advantages and pleasures of wedded bliss, well, let's spell that out. Bush can also look forward to a lifetime of cake. Sarah is a serial baker. I'm trying to think, there must be a more dramatic word than baker. Cake manufacturer, possibly. So Bush has that to look forward to. And from Sarah's point of view, Bush is almost the perfect husband. I say almost because, as far as I'm aware, Bush doesn't have any body piercings. And it's always been asserted that a woman prefers to marry a man with body piercings because he's both bought jewelry and experienced pain. The other question which they'll have to confront, and we don't want to confront this in too much detail, is the question of children. There are some here tonight. How many should they have? The issue. The number of cuttings, as it were, that they might take from Bush. George Burns, the famous American comedian, did a sort of chat show where he spoke to the man in the street. It was a kind of Wilfred Pickles of his day, and hands up those who can remember Wilfred Pickles. I didn't actually mean that. And they said George Burns interviewing a man, and it became clear in the interview that the man had had a lot of children. And he said, I've had 12 children. I have 12 children. And George Burns said, why on earth have you had 12 children? And he said, because I love my wife. And George Burns replied, well, I love my cigar, but I take it out from time to time. And of course, after the wedding, we have the honeymoon. You're going to Mauritius, which is all very well, but friends of ours had a honeymoon to get away from it all, and a cheap honeymoon, if you're stuck for cash. Cheap honeymoon. They went to a lonely farmhouse in a very remote part of the Highlands. And they arrived in the farmhouse and immediately went to the room, which is a sort of annex behind the farmhouse. And they were in there for 2-3 days, and they never came out. And the farmer and his wife eventually began to get a little concerned. So the farmer went up to the door, knocked on it, and a muffled voice from within said, yes. And he said, it's the farmer here. He said, well, you've been in there for 2 or 3 days. We're getting a bit worried. Are you all right? He says, yes, we're all right. He says, are you not hungry? He said, you've been in there for 2 days. It's all right, he said, we're living off the fruits of love. Oh, said the farmer, Well, could you stop throwing the peelings out the window because it's choking the hens? Anyways, that concludes my introductory remarks. I'd now like to propose a toast to the bridesmaids. Now, the bridesmaids have something in common with each other. The bridesmaids are both somnambulists. Now, this is not some obscure cult. A somnambulist is someone who sleepwalks. And both Mary Ann and Lorna walk in their sleep. In fact, it's quite surprising that both of them are still here, given the length of this speech. But they share that with the bridegroom's father, who is also a bit of a somnambulist. It sounds a bit more exciting when you put it that way. One bridesmaid I know rather better than the other. Lorna, my daughter, sitting over there looking bored to tears. Lorna's a very happy child. She was a serial bridesmaid for many years. Bridesmaid, and then she got married. So it was bridesmaid, bride. And now she's bridesmaid again. It's endless. It's an endless process of getting dressed up and drinking Prosecco. It's going to go on for years. Lorna lists as her interests chocolate, Pinot Noir, John Lewis department store, cultivating the bald old man with the wallet, and celebrating wildly Scotland's rugby victories. Not much call for that, I'm afraid. Mary Ann and I first met in the intimate, stylish bijou cocktail bar that is the Buckyard. We spent a very pleasant evening there, which I greatly enjoyed, and I had only very slight misgivings about her sanity, but for the most part, I greatly enjoyed it. I've since learned a few things about her. She also has apparently some unique gift which makes even very slow horses go very fast. Donkeys are known to take off like racehorses as soon as you get on them. I've also been told by, I think, the bride's father, what the phrase for this is, but it's such a nasty anatomical phrase, I'm simply not going to repeat it. At school, she and Sarah were so inebriated by Coca-Cola, by the sugar rush of Coca-Cola, that on a school trip, after 2 days, they were not allowed to take any Coca-Cola because they were hyper, and they were on water the rest of that trip. Now, this is a girl that's since left school and has now been launched into an unsuspecting world where not only Coca-Cola, but alcohol is freely available. And the rest, as they say, is history. What's the purpose of a bridesmaid? The purpose of a bridesmaid, I think, is threefold. It's to support the bride. It's to look elegant. And it's to enhance the enjoyment of the whole day by supplying smiles and laughter. And I think we can all agree that these bridesmaids have both succeeded 100% in achieving these functions. So I would like for you all to stand up this time and propose a toast to our two bridesmaids. The bridesmaids.
Well done, Alan.